The night was quiet, only the sound of wind moving through the empty fields. The moonlight spread over the farmer's land, making the crops look silver. In the distance, an old wooden house stood, dark except for one lamp glowing in the window. Inside, the farmer sat at his table, tired after a long day of work. His name was Daniel, a man who lived alone for many years. Daniel had learned to live with silence. He had lost his family long ago, so his farm was the only thing he cared about. He worked hard from sunrise to sunset, never letting strangers come near his land. But that night, something disturbed the silence. A soft rustling sound came from the far side of his field. At first, Daniel thought it was the wind, but then he heard it again, sharper, like footsteps moving too carefully. He stood up, picked up the old lantern, and stepped outside. The cool night air touched his face. He narrowed his eyes, scanning the rows of crops. Then he saw it. A small shadow moving between the plants, bending low, hands reaching out to tear the food from the stalks. Daniel's heart jumped. Someone was stealing. His boots pressed against the dirt as he walked, closer, careful but firm. The shadow froze, realizing someone was near. For a moment, it looked like a frightened animal ready to run. Daniel raised his voice, rough and strong. "Who's there?" The figure turned. The lantern light fell across a face. It was not human. Daniel stopped in surprise. Her skin carried a faint glow of silver blue, her eyes wide, shining with hunger and fear. She was young, maybe not more than 20. Her hands shook as she held the stolen crops tight against her chest. Daniel's voice hardened. "You're on my land, stealing my food." The alien girl swallowed hard. Her lips trembled as she whispered, I had no choice." Her voice was soft but broken. It was not the sound of arrogance or crime, it was the sound of someone desperate. Daniel took a step closer and she stepped back, almost tripping. "Why here? Why my field?" he asked. Anger, mixed with curiosity. Her glowing eyes lowered. "I was hungry. I haven't eaten in days, please. Don't hurt me. I only needed enough to live." Daniel looked at her carefully. Her clothes were torn. Dirt covered her arms, and her body looked thin, weaker than it should have been. She was not lying. He could see the truth written on her face. Still, anger burned in him. This was his land, his hard work. "Hungry or not, you can't just take what doesn't belong to you," he said sharply. The alien girl's eyes filled with tears, but she did not run. Instead, she pressed the crops tighter against her chest and whispered the strangest words Daniel had ever heard. "I will repay you, human. I will work your fields by day and at night. I will give you warmth, please, only let me stay." Daniel froze. His heart beat faster. He had expected begging, maybe even an attempt to escape, but not this. Her offer sounded unreal, almost frightening in its honesty. He could see she was shaking, as if the words cost her great courage to say. "Do you even understand what you are saying?" Daniel asked, voice low. She nodded slowly. "It is the way of my people. When we are saved from hunger, when we are given a chance, we give everything back. My work, my life, my warmth. It is all I can offer." The night grew colder, but Daniel did not feel the wind anymore. His mind raced. He looked at her, this fragile, starving alien thief, and something inside him stirred. He had been alone for so long. His farm had only known silence. Now, before him stood a stranger who promised not only labor but companionship. Yet he could not trust so easily. He stepped closer, his lantern shining fully on her. She flinched but did not move away. Her silver blue skin shimmered faintly under the light. Her face was delicate but marked with exhaustion. She looked like someone who had run far, suffered much, and carried scars no one could see. Daniel's hand tightened on the lantern handle. "If I let you stay, how do I know you won't steal again or run away in the morning?" Her answer came without pause. "Because I have nowhere else to go. If you turn me away tonight, I will die. The hunters will find me, or the hunger will finish me. Please, I only ask for a chance." Her voice cracked at the last word. Daniel felt the weight of her desperation. He saw not a thief but a lost soul fighting to survive. The silence stretched between them, heavy and sharp. The crops rustled softly in the wind, and the lantern light trembled against the darkness. Finally, Daniel let out a long breath. His anger had not vanished, but his heart would not let him turn away. He lowered the lantern slightly, looking at her one last time. "You will come with me," he said at last. "No running, no stealing. If you mean your words, then prove it." The alien girl's eyes widened, filled with both fear and relief. She nodded quickly, clutching the stolen food as if it was her last treasure. Daniel turned and began walking back to his house. The night was still quiet, but now every step felt heavier. Behind him, he heard her footsteps follow, soft and uncertain. The farmer did not know if he had made the right choice. He did not know if danger had just entered his life, but he knew one thing. His lonely farm would never be the same again. The wooden door creaked as Daniel pushed it open. The lantern's light spilled across the small farmhouse, showing a rough wooden table, a cold fireplace, and shelves stacked with jars of grain. The alien girl stepped inside slowly, her bare feet pressing against the old wooden floor. Her glowing eyes scanned the room as if she had never seen a place like this before. Daniel set the lantern on the table and turned to face her. His voice was low, controlled. "Sit." She obeyed, sitting, carefully at the edge of the chair, clutching the stolen crops in her hands like a shield. Daniel studied her in silence, the flickering light showing every detail of her tired face. Her skin carried faint marks, thin scars running down her arms. Her hair was tangled, a pale silver, color that caught the light in strange ways. For a long moment, neither spoke. The night outside was quiet, the fields whispering in the wind. Then Daniel broke the silence. "You said you'd repay me, work my fields by day, warmth by night. Why would you make such an offer to a stranger?" The girl lowered her head, her voice was soft but steady. "Because I have no choice in my world. When someone spares your life, you give them all you can, labor, loyalty, and even comfort. That is our way. Without it, we are nothing." Daniel frowned. "That sounds like slavery." Her eyes lifted quickly, glowing faintly in the dark. "No, not slavery. A vow. I give it freely. If you send me away, I have nothing but death waiting for me." Her words carried weight, heavy like stones. Daniel leaned back in his chair. His calloused hands rested on the table. He could see her body trembling slightly from hunger, exhaustion, and fear. She was fragile, yet she spoke with courage. That made him pause. "Why my farm?" he asked after a long silence. "You could have stolen from the village, from the market." Her lips pressed tightly before she answered. "Because humans in the village hate my kind. They call us thieves, pests, shadows. They throw stones when they see us, but here, your fields were quiet. I thought maybe I could take only a little and no one would know." Daniel's jaw clenched. He had seen the hatred in the village himself. The wars had left scars not only on land but also in hearts. Aliens were no longer trusted. Many were abandoned, hunted, or forced into hard labor. The girl placed the crops on the table slowly, pushing them toward him. Her voice shook as she whispered, "If you want these back, take them. I will not fight, but let me work for you. Let me live, please." Daniel stared at the food, then at her thin arms. He thought of all the long, lonely nights he had spent in this house, nights filled only with silence. He thought of the empty chair across his table that had stayed empty for years. His anger began to melt into something else. Pity, maybe even curiosity. "You say you'll work," he said at last. "Do you even know how to farm?" "It's hard. Labor from sunrise to sunset." She nodded quickly. "I am stronger than I look. My people were raised to work the land. We were made for survival." She paused, her voice softer now. "And at night, I will give you warmth, not because I must, but because it is the only gift left in me." Her words made the air heavier. Daniel felt his chest tighten. It was not the offer of her body that struck him, but the honesty of her desperation. She had nothing else to trade, nothing else to promise. He stood up and walked toward the window, staring out into the dark fields. The stars stretched across the sky, silent witnesses to his decision. He could hear her breathing behind him, quiet but fast, waiting for his answer. Finally, Daniel turned back, his eyes sharp, but no longer filled with anger. If you want to, stay here. There will be rules. You will work as I say. You will eat only what I give, and you will not betray my trust. Do you understand? Her face lit with relief. Her glowing eyes shimmered like wet glass, as she nodded again and again. Yes, I understand. I will not betray you, I swear it. Daniel walked back to the table, picked up the stolen crops and placed them in front of her. Eat, he ordered. She blinked in surprise, her hands shaking as she picked up the food. She ate quickly, but not greedily, as if she was afraid the food might disappear if she waited too long. Daniel watched her in silence, the sound of her chewing filling the small room. When she finished, she whispered, "Thank you." Her voice carried more emotion than the simple words should have. Daniel sat back down, tired but strangely restless. His mind kept circling around her strange offer, her scars, and her glowing eyes. He did not trust her completely, but something inside him had already shifted. For the first time in many years, his house did not feel empty. The fire cracked softly in the hearth as he lit it, filling the room with warmth. The alien girl sat quietly near the fire, folding her arms around herself. The shadows on the walls moved like ghosts, but Daniel's gaze remained fixed on her. He did not know what tomorrow would bring. He did not know if danger followed her. But tonight, in this dark and quiet house, he had made a bargain that could change both their lives forever. The first light of dawn spread across the horizon, painting the sky with pale orange and soft pink. Daniel stepped out of his farmhouse, the morning air cold against his skin. He carried a shovel in one hand and a bucket in the other. The earth was damp with dew, and the crops stood tall, waiting for another long day of work. Behind him, the alien girl followed quietly. She had slept near the fire, curled like a child. Now she walked barefoot across the soil, her silver-blue skin catching the early light. Her hair, tangled and pale, shone faintly in the sun. She looked weak, yet her eyes burned with determination. Daniel stopped at the edge of the field. His voice was calm but testing. "You said you can work, prove it." She nodded without hesitation. "Tell me what to do." Daniel pointed to the rows of plants. "The soil needs turning. You will dig, loosen it, and clear the weeds. All day, most strangers would have argued, but she only bent her knees, took the shovel he offered, and began. Her thin arms pressed hard against the wooden handle. At tier. First her movements were clumsy, too quick. But soon Daniel noticed something strange. With each swing, the earth gave way as if it was lighter for her. The shovel cut deeper, faster. Her body moved with rhythm, not human rhythm, something sharper, more natural. Daniel narrowed his eyes, crossing his arms. She was no ordinary girl. Her strength was hidden under her fragile form. She worked like someone who had done this all her life. Hours passed. The sun rose higher. Daniel himself worked nearby, fixing fences and carrying water. He kept glancing at her, expecting her to collapse, but she did not stop. Sweat ran down her glowing skin, mixing with dirt. Her breaths were heavy, but her arms did not give in. By noon, Daniel walked to her with a jug of water. "Drink," he said. She looked up, surprised. Her lips cracked from dryness. She took the jug and drank deeply. Then she whispered, "Thank you, human." Daniel studied her face. Her cheeks were hollow, her eyes shadowed with exhaustion. But there was pride, too. She did not want pity. She wanted to prove her worth. "Why push yourself like this?" Daniel asked. "You could rest, no one would blame you." Her hands tightened on the shovel. She looked down at the earth. "Because I must. If I cannot work, I am nothing. My people, they believe in the vow. If I fail, then I fail myself. I will not let that happen." Daniel's jaw tightened. He remembered her words from last night, her vow of loyalty, of warmth. It was more than survival for her. It was honor. The day stretched long. The sun burned hot. Daniel expected her to slow, but she kept going even when her arms trembled. Even when her breath came in gasps, the soil around her was turned, clean and ready for planting, faster than he could have done alone. Near evening, as the sky began to turn gold, Daniel finally said, "Enough." She dropped the shovel and fell to her knees, her chest rising and falling fast. Her body shook, but she did not complain. She lifted her face, dirt smudged across her cheeks, and asked softly, "Did I do well?" Daniel hesitated. The words did not come easily, but finally he nodded. "Yes, you did." Her lips curved in the smallest smile, the first true smile he had seen on her face. He helped her stand. His rough hand touched her thin arm, and for a moment, he felt the strange warmth of her skin. It was not like human warmth, it carried a soft energy, faint, but alive. He pulled his hand back quickly, hiding his surprise. They walked back toward the farmhouse, the fields behind them glowing under the last rays of light. For Daniel, it was the first time in years the land felt less heavy, less lonely. Inside, she sat again near the fire, wrapping herself in an old blanket Daniel had thrown to her. She closed her eyes, her body still trembling from the day's labor, but Daniel noticed something. Despite the exhaustion, there was peace on her face, as the flames crackled. Daniel asked, "What is your name?" Her eyes opened slowly. She hesitated, then whispered, "Leora." Daniel repeated the name softly. "Leora." The word felt strange on his tongue, yet fitting. Leora looked into the fire, her voice low. "I was not always alone, my people. They lived in villages once, we had fields too. We worked, we sang, we lived, but then came the war, the hunters, they burned it all. We scattered, many died, some were taken." Her voice cracked. "I ran." Daniel listened, saying nothing, but his chest grew tight. He could see her pain. He could almost hear the echoes of screams in her trembling words. Leora closed her eyes again, whispering, "I only want a place where no one chases me. A place where I can work. A place where I can breathe." Daniel sat in silence, staring at the fire. He had not asked for her story, but now he carried it, heavy and real. For the first time in years, he felt the walls of his loneliness break just a little. The night grew darker. The wind outside howled against the farmhouse walls, but inside the fire glowed warm. Leora's breathing slowed as she drifted into sleep. Daniel watched her for a moment longer, then turned away. He knew danger still followed her. He knew this. Fragile peace could break at any time. But tonight, after a long day in the fields, one thing was clear. She had proven herself. And for reasons Daniel could not yet explain, he wanted her to stay. The farmhouse was quiet after the long day. The smell of earth still clung to Daniel's clothes, and his muscles ached from work. He sat at the wooden table, staring at the lantern flame. His thoughts circled around the girl, Leora, her strength in the fields, her scars, her vow. She was unlike anyone he had ever met. Across the room, near the fireplace, Leora sat wrapped in the old blanket. Her silver blue skin glowed faintly in the dim light. Her eyes followed the fire as if she feared it might vanish. She looked fragile, yet Daniel knew the truth. Behind, her thin frame was a survivor who carried more pain than she spoke of. The silence stretched, only broken by the crackling fire. Finally, Leora spoke, her voice soft. "You have given me food, and today you let me work. I kept my vow. But tonight, I must keep the other part too." Daniel's head lifted, his jaw tightening. He remembered her words from the first night. Work by day, warmth by night. He had thought it strange, even reckless. Now she looked at him with steady eyes, as if ready to fulfill that promise. He leaned back in his chair, voice calm but firm. "You don't have to, Leora. I didn't take you in for that." Her lips trembled, her hands tightening on the blanket. "It is not about what you want. It is about what I must give. My vow is everything. Without it, I have no honor left. You saved me from hunger. You gave me a place to breathe. Tonight I give what little I can." Daniel stood and walked closer, his shadow stretching across the wooden floor. He looked down at her, at the fear and courage mixed in her face. He shook his head slowly. I don't need your body, Leora. That's not what I want. She blinked, her glowing eyes wide. Then, what do you want from me? Daniel's voice grew softer. Only truth, only trust, nothing more. Leora lowered her gaze. Her hands loosened their grip on the blanket. She seemed to fight tears. For so long, she had been treated as nothing more than property, hunted and used. And here stood a man who asked for neither her body nor her vow, only honesty. For a long moment the silence returned. Then she moved closer to the fire, curling her knees to her chest, her voice barely above a whisper. Then let me give you my warmth in another way. Let me share my story, so you will know who I truly am. Daniel pulled a chair near the fire, sitting across from her. The flames flickered between them, painting the room in gold and shadow. She began, her words slow, heavy. My people once lived by the rivers. Our fields stretched far. Our homes were built with songs and light. We were not warriors. We were farmers, singers, healers, but the hunters came. They saw us as weak. They took our land, our children, our voices. Her eyes glistened. I was taken too. I was chained, forced to work until my hands bled. I escaped one night, ran until my feet tore. Open, I thought freedom would mean peace, but it only meant hunger and fear. I had nowhere to go, nowhere to belong. She looked up at Daniel, her voice breaking. Until I saw your fields. Daniel's chest tightened. He could see her pain not just in her words but in her trembling hands. He wanted to look away, but he could not. He had lived with loss. But her story carried a weight heavier than his loneliness. The fire popped, sending sparks into the air. Daniel finally said, You're safe here as long as you keep your vow of truth. Leora nodded, her shoulders trembling. Then, to his surprise, she shifted closer, sitting at the edge of his chair. The blanket still wrapped around her. She did not touch him, but her presence was near, warm in its own way. This is what I meant, she whispered. Warmth is not always flesh. Sometimes it is simply being near. Sometimes it is sitting by the fire and not feeling alone. Daniel looked at her, and for the first time in many years he felt that truth. The farmhouse, once filled only with silence, now carried something different. Companionship. The night grew darker. The wind outside howled across the fields, but inside the fire kept them close. Daniel leaned back, his eyes heavy from the day. Leora rested quietly beside the fire, her breathing steady. As he drifted toward sleep, a thought nagged. At him, danger was still out there. She had spoken of hunters, men who would not stop searching for runaways. He wondered if they already knew where she was, if they were already on their way. He opened his eyes one last time, glancing at her. She was asleep now, her face calm for the first time since he had met her. The blanket rose and fell with her, soft breaths. She looked less like a thief and more like a lost child who had finally found a corner of safety. Daniel whispered into the quiet room, though she could not hear. You can stay, Leora, but if danger comes, I will not let them take you. The fire burned low. The farmhouse sank into silence. And in that silence, a fragile promise was born, one that would soon be tested in ways neither of them could yet imagine. The morning sun broke through the farmhouse window, spreading light across the wooden floor. Daniel rose early as always, his body moving with the rhythm of habit. He washed his face, pulled on his boots, and stepped outside to check the fields. The soil smelled fresh after last night's wind. Behind him he heard soft footsteps. Leora followed, her blanket wrapped around her shoulders. Her glowing skin looked softer in daylight, less alien, more fragile. She carried the same determination, in her eyes as yesterday, but something else too, something unspoken. Are you ready to work again? Daniel asked, his tone steady. Yes, she replied, her voice quiet but firm. I will not fail, I promised. Together they worked the land, Daniel teaching her which crops needed water, which weeds to pull, how to set traps for wild animals that sometimes ruined the fields. She listened carefully, her hands quick to learn. Her movements grew smoother, as if the earth itself remembered her touch. But as the hours passed, Daniel noticed her silence. She did not hum, she did not smile. Even when she managed a task well, it was as if a shadow followed her, heavy and unseen. By midday, Daniel finally asked, "What are you hiding, Leora?" She froze, her hands tightening around the wooden bucket she carried. For a moment she did not answer. Then her lips parted, her words trembling. "I hide the truth, because truth is dangerous." Daniel's brow furrowed. "Dangerous for who?" Her glowing eyes lifted, shining like wet glass. "For you, if you keep me. For me, if they find me." He set down his tools, his voice harder now. "You've spoken of hunters. You've spoken of chains. But I need to know more. If danger is coming here, I must be ready." She hesitated, her chest rising and falling fast. Then slowly she set the bucket down and sat on the ground, her knees pulled close. Her voice shook as she began to whisper. "My people once lived free, but the hunters came, not as soldiers, but as masters. They wore collars of iron and fire. They placed them on us, and with one touch of the chain they bent our will. We became tools, not people, forced to labor, forced to obey. Those who fought were burned alive. Those who begged were silenced." Daniel's fists clenched. The image of such cruelty burned in his mind. Leora touched the side of her neck, pulling the blanket lower. Daniel's eyes widened. There, faint but visible, were scars. Thin, ring-shaped, burned deep into her glowing skin. "This was mine," she whispered. "The collar that chained me. I wore it until I escaped, but it left its mark forever." Her hands trembled as she covered her neck again. "That is why I vow, human. That is why I give all I can. If someone shows me mercy, I must return it with my whole life. Because once, I was not allowed to give anything at all." The silence pressed heavy between them. Daniel could hear his own heartbeat. He had thought she was only a starving thief, desperate for food, but now he saw the truth. She was a survivor of horrors no human could imagine. He crouched down, his voice low. "Leora, no one will put chains on you here." Her eyes widened, her lips trembling as if she wanted to believe him but could not. She whispered, "Do not promise what you cannot keep. The hunters do not forget. They will come. They always come." Daniel felt the weight of her words. He looked out across the wide field, so open, so vulnerable. If such hunters existed, his farm was no fortress. Yet something inside him hardened. He would not hand her over. He could not. "You said truth was dangerous," Daniel said, his tone firm now. "But lies are worse. If you stay here, I must know everything, no more hiding." Her breath caught. She nodded slowly, though her body trembled. "Then you must know this. I did not only escape, I stole something from them when I fled. Something they will not forgive. That is why they hunt me still." Daniel's jaw tightened. "What did you take?" Her eyes flickered toward the horizon, her voice almost a whisper. "Hope." He frowned, not understanding, but she said no more. She only bowed her head and whispered, "When they find me, they will burn your fields too." The wind carried her words away, leaving the farm in eerie silence. Daniel stood, his mind heavy with questions he could not answer. But one truth had settled deep in him. Leora's past was not just her own burden. It was now his as well. That night, as the fire burned low inside the farmhouse, Daniel sat at the table staring at her while she slept by the hearth. Her scars haunted him. Her vow echoed in his ears. Her past whispered in every shadow, and though he tried to push it aside, one thought would not leave him. If the hunters truly came, he would have to decide not only how far he was willing to protect her, but also what her secret truly meant. The night was colder than usual. A restless wind swept across the farm, carrying with it a strange unease. Daniel sat at the table staring at the dying fire. His thoughts were heavy with Leora's words from earlier. "I stole something when I fled. That is why they hunt me still." He looked toward the hearth where she slept curled in the blanket. Her breaths came slow and steady, but even in sleep her face was not at peace. She twitched sometimes, whispering words he could not understand. Haunted by dreams of chains, Daniel rubbed his hand over his face. His farm had never known trouble before. He had lived quietly, working the soil, paying no attention to the world outside. But now trouble had found him. Trouble with glowing eyes and scars around her neck. A sound broke the silence. Faint, distant, but sharp enough to catch his ear. Daniel froze, listening. It was not the wind, not the call of night birds. It was the crack of a branch under a heavy foot. Slowly, he rose and stepped to the window. Pulling the curtain just enough to peer outside, the field stretched dark under the moonlight, empty at first glance. But then he saw it. Movement near the fence line, a shadow slipping between the rows of crops. His chest tightened. He knew this was not a neighbor. The figure moved too carefully, too silently, and behind it, he caught another glimpse. Then, another. 3, maybe 4 shadows closing in. Daniel's hand tightened into a fist. The hunters. He turned toward Leora. She was still asleep, unaware of the danger creeping closer. He crossed the room quickly and knelt beside her, shaking her shoulder gently. "Leora," he whispered, "wake up." Her eyes snapped open instantly, wide, with fear, as if she had been trained to wake in panic. "What is it?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "They're here," Daniel said, his tone low and urgent. Shadows near the field, moving toward the house. Her breath caught. She sat up fast, her hands clenching the blanket. Her glowing eyes flicked toward the window, and in them Daniel saw both terror and fury. "They've found me," she whispered, almost broken. "They never stop. They never stop." Daniel grabbed his lantern and blew it out, plunging the room into darkness only. The faint glow of the dying fire lighting their faces, he spoke firmly. "Listen to me. If they come here, you do not leave my side. Do you understand?" She nodded quickly, though her hands shook. "But if they see me, they will take me, they will kill you." Daniel's jaw tightened, his voice rough. "They'll have to get through me first." Outside, the footsteps grew louder, closer, the crunch of soil under boots, the low murmur of voices carried by the wind. The hunters were not hiding anymore. They knew their prey was trapped. Daniel moved to the door, grabbing the old iron tool he used for chopping wood. It was not a sword, not a weapon meant for war, but it was heavy, and in his hands it would be enough, he whispered back to her. "Hide by the fireplace. If I fall, you run through the back door." But Leora shook her head fiercely, her voice rising in a whisper sharp with resolve. "No, I will not run again. I ran once and it only brought me here. If they want me, they will face both of us." Daniel turned, shocked by the fire in her voice. She stood tall now, no longer just a starving thief. Her scars glowed faintly under the firelight. Her eyes no longer begged. They promised resistance. The first knock rattled the wooden door. Heavy and demanding, a deep voice called, "We know she is here, human. Step aside, and you will not be harmed." Daniel's blood ran hot. He shouted back, "There's no one here for you. Leave my farm." A cruel laugh answered him, followed by the scrape of metal against wood. "Do not lie to us. We can smell her fear. Give her to us, and we will spare your fields. Refuse, and we burn everything you own." Leora pressed her hands over her mouth, muffling a sob. Daniel glanced at her, then back at the door. His grip on the iron tool tightened. He knew this was no empty threat. If they set fire to the fields, his entire life would turn to ash. But when he looked at Leora's trembling figure, the decision was already made. He growled through the door, "This is my land. You want her? Then come and take her." The silence that followed was colder than the night wind. Then came the sound of boots stomping against the porch. The hunters were coming in. Daniel turned to Leora, his voice sharp. "Stay low. Stay behind me." The door burst open with a crack, splinters flying across the room. The firelight revealed 3 tall figures armored in dark leather, their eyes burning with cruelty. Chains clinked at their sides, heavy and ready. One of them pointed straight at Leora, his voice harsh. "There, she is the runaway." Daniel stepped forward, blocking their path, his iron tool raised, his voice a thunderous growl. "She is under my roof. You will not take her." The hunters sneered, their weapons glinting in the firelight. The standoff filled the farmhouse with unbearable tension. For the first time in many years, Daniel felt alive. His blood roared, his heart pounded. He was only a farmer, but tonight, he stood as something more, and beside him Leora rose, her glowing skin brightening as if fire lived under her veins. Her voice rang with strength. "You will not chain me again." The hunters moved, and the farmhouse exploded into chaos. The farmhouse shook with the sound of crashing wood and clashing metal. Daniel swung the iron tool with the strength of a man who had spent his life working the land. His arms burned, his chest heaved, but he did not give ground. The first hunter lunged, chain whipping forward like a snake. Daniel blocked it with the tool, sparks flying as iron scraped against iron. He shoved back hard, sending the man stumbling. Behind him, Leora's glow brightened. Her eyes blazed like silver fire. She raised her hands, and Daniel saw something he had never seen before. Light flickered across her skin, patterns moving like living marks. The second hunter snarled and charged at her, but she stepped aside. With surprising speed, her hand shot out, grabbing his arm. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the man screamed, dropping his weapon as his muscles locked. Daniel realized her touch carried power, faint but real. The hunters recoiled, their confidence shaken. The third one spat in anger. "She is cursed, she must be chained again," Daniel roared back, his voice filled with fury. "She will never wear chains again." The fight raged on. The hunters struck with cruel precision, but Daniel fought with the stubborn strength of a man protecting his home. Leora moved like a shadow of light, striking not with brute force but with quickness and strange energy. Together they were clumsy, untrained, but they fought as one. Finally, Daniel swung the iron tool hard across the first hunter's chest, knocking him to the floor, breathless and beaten. Leora pressed her glowing hand to the second's face, forcing him back, screaming as silver marks burned across his skin. The third, seeing his companions fall, cursed and stumbled toward the door, but Daniel's voice thundered, "Leave this land and never return." The man spat on the floor, hatred burning in his eyes, but he retreated into the night, dragging the wounded hunters with him. Their shadows vanished across the fields, swallowed by darkness. The farmhouse fell silent again. The fire crackled. Broken wood lay scattered. The air stank of sweat and smoke. Daniel stood in the ruins of his doorway, chest heaving. His arms shook, but he still held the iron tool, ready if they returned. Slowly he lowered it. His gaze turned to Leora. She stood in the firelight, her body trembling, her glowing patterns slowly fading back into her skin. Her face pale, but her eyes alive. For the first time since he met her, she looked free. Not just alive, but free. Daniel stepped closer, his voice low but steady. "It's over. They're gone." Her lips parted, a soft whisper escaping. "Now." She swayed on her feet, and Daniel caught her before she fell. Her body was warm, too warm, like fire burning under her skin. He carried her to the chair and set her down. Her head rested against his shoulder for a moment. And in that moment, he felt something stir inside him, something deeper than pity, stronger than duty. When her breathing steadied, she opened her eyes again, whispering, "Why did you fight for me, Daniel? You could have let them take me. You could have saved yourself." He looked at her, his voice rough. "Because you are not a thief anymore. You are not a burden. You are part of this place now, and I will not let anyone take that away." Her eyes filled with tears glowing in the firelight, she whispered, "No one has ever spoken those words to me." Daniel turned away, hiding the heaviness in his chest. He began to rebuild the door with quick, strong hands. The farm had been his, world of silence for so long, but now it carried two voices and it no longer felt empty. The next morning the sun rose golden over the fields, the soil glistened with dew. Daniel stepped outside, Leora followed. Her steps were weak, but her spirit was stronger than before. Together they walked the rows of crops. The land bore scars of the night, but it still stood just as they did. Daniel paused, looking across the fields. "We will plant again," he said firmly. "We will rebuild, and this farm will not fall to chains or flames." Leora smiled faintly, her voice soft but filled with hope. "Then let me plant with you. Let me be more than a survivor. Let me be part of this tomorrow." Daniel looked at her, and for the first time in years, he allowed himself to smile. Then tomorrow begins today. They worked side by side, their hands pressing seeds into the soil. Each seed felt like a promise that life could grow again even after fire, even after chains. And as the sun climbed higher, shining across the wide fields, Daniel knew his farm had changed forever. Not because of the crops, not because of the land, but because of the vow whispered in the dark and the fight won in the night. Leora was no longer a thief, no longer just a runaway. She was part of his fields, part of his fire, part of his tomorrow. And together, under the endless sky, they began to build a new life one day at a time.